haven't finished reading it yet, but I'm going to do a part 2, and reading it was actually sort of distressing for me because I shared so much, and I don't even remember that I shared so much. But partly why I did was that was before my distress here in California. I wrote that before that, and it actually could have maybe provoked some of the distress, and in being in distress I was in more detail about my distress, and I don't know if I really like that, but it's already out there, and I guess that's just the way it is. And I also had the sense reading some of it that those same sentences I wrote about my interpretation of that crisis I had in January, if just looked at a little differently, can actually describe a prior traumatic situation, but just with different characters and different things. And it just feels like every moment is now, and those moments are still with me because they're still happening now, because they happened, and time is not linear, and things are non-local, and it's just kind of confusing. And I hope I didn't distress myself by reading that. And I'm kind of tired, and it might have been a bad day to read that and really realize, holy crap, I shared all this. And even saying that, holy crap, look at all the stuff I've said to myself, and I might share all that, and one day think, holy crap, look at what I shared. I can't believe I said all that because I can't remember everything I said. So it's kind of bizarre, and I guess I'll read the rest of it, and it's kind of a crappy thing to read. I thought it was maybe more positive, but this is actually awful, and that experience really was awful, and writing about it was awful, and reading about it is awful, and sharing it is awful, and I just don't want the next year of my life to have anything to do with that. And I really, really would love to ask the universe to make that possible, because I don't want to go back there, and I feel partly like I'm a little bit back there after reading that, and it's just awful, and it makes me a little bit more afraid to go home, because it's like going back into a completely different reality. It's not just this benign progression of time, like in a month I'm going back home. No, it's that's here now, and I'm here now, and the past is here now, and it's like moving back into the past and being closer to the past and the resonances of the past, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I'll read the rest. So in knowing myself, I was able to be my own psychiatrist and avoid the possibility of being at the whim of one who is paternalistic instead of collaborative, pills first instead of person first, and blindly induces iatrogenic illness as a part of best practice. Know thyself and thy patterns. Know what are your rhythms and patterns, and know when a treatment is making you worse, which could be passed off as worsening of your illness. I feel like this is all a type of strength training. I feel like next time I can possibly go through the 3 days of distress without alerting others, and perhaps one day I will have people in my life who can support me through it without having to take PRNs. It seems that it is all a learning process, and that one day I will completely transcend the mental health system in a slow dance with altered states. This, perhaps, may alter the state of affairs for others who have not fared as well due to unfair treatment that seems justified due to the nature of the inner turmoil. There are gifts in all of this learning, in seeing that our brains are being funneled back into a box of so-called normality. I feel our brains are transforming into a unique neurotribe needed to transform the world. I see it as a kind of gift of acquired, highly sensitive personhood among infinite other reframes and perspectives. There is a selective pressure from Gaia for our consciousness to transform beyond the confines of the limited self. Gaia is doing this, and it has nothing to do with the will of the human ego. Yet psychiatric egos come in and warp this natural process. I truly feel that one day we will see that our brains are transforming so that we can help those who think that we need their help, so that they can see what is beyond this reality of conditioned thought constructs. If they saw it too, they'd want to be there with us, which is just a now here of a different vitality and energy. If we can engage in true dialogue, not just in order to reconnect us to consensus reality, but to share our diverse perceptions, such that consensus reality levels up energetically. This would make it easier for them to see what we are talking about. Much of this might not sound like it has anything to do with spiritual emergence. However, I feel that many of us have to emerge with, through, and out of the mental health system. Many of us become imprisoned by medications that can be difficult to taper off of once our bodies adapt and are addicted. My hope is that one day it will be received differently and based on the sameness of common humanity. There is a lot of great work happening around this. We as individuals and together might have a significant role to play in quickening the shift. Can we learn about ourselves along the way to such an extent that we can rely more on ourselves and our community and less on psychiatry? Can we develop herd immunity, which is the immunity to what we've heard about ourselves from the lens of psychiatry? Only together are we immune to the memes of psychiatry. I wonder what we are emerging for. The word emerge contains merge, and just as emotion has been said to mean energy in motion, then perhaps emerge is energy merging. Merging with what or for what? I feel it's about emerging together, as emerging without others to merge with has no meaning. Merging implies two. When will spiritual and emergence not feel like anything special, as it is just intrinsically part of who we are as human beings? When will the term spiritual disappear, as the duality of non-spiritual is no longer part of humanity? Why do we even need spiritual emergence? Is it not a reaction to the non-spiritual divergence? Right now, we do need this process in consciousness in order to make things right from the perspective of Gaia and the cosmos. When we see with that vision, we merge with that energy. When we see with the division of the personal self, it creates further chaos. Blah, blah, blah. The energy of the universe animates us, and we can get with that as it removes all contrivances. When thought image operates through us, we react according to programs. I chose from the very beginning to take the journey through the mental health systems, slowly, step by step, without resistance. Now I can see why. Now I can see what spiritual emergence is warped into in various ways. I see what my peers are up against and how they're being limited. Unfortunately, emergence is not allowed to flower and unfold. Perhaps we need to find those who would merge with us and not turn us into the perception police. Instead, it's warped with medications and outdated context. Why do people with a diagnosis have permanently defective brains when neuroscience speaks of neuroplasticity in every other field? I feel our brains are too neuroplastic, and that scares the status quo. We are programmed to believe in our individual personalities. I feel the critical mass of energy needed to shift the world is contained within the minds and hearts of those who have been labeled. Can we reframe ourselves infinitely and regain reality to be in alignment with the merging of the universe? Walking there together hand in hand. How do I create safety for myself so I can continue to emerge proud and not be shamed, psychologically maimed, and chemically tamed by a visit to the psych ward? How can we thrive and unfold our unique creation as the world? So I can't believe I wrote all that and shared it. And I can't believe I've said all this and I might share it. There seems to be a common theme. And I might have to take a fourth vitamin C today to really neutralize some of this distress of realizing what I have shared. And it's kind of scary. And maybe by sharing everything, there is no fear. I really don't know. And since I'm kind of in a weird state right now after reading that, I may as well share my last thoughts on death that I didn't share because it was out of order in my notes when I was talking about death more. And I wrote that death is a parallel reality that's always there, always possible, always present. That state, that altered state, is contact with death. Death speaking, knocking at one's door. Maybe not ultimately, but as a reminder. Think about people who have brushes with death through cancer. This is another type of brush with death. An overtaker, a takeover coach, somebody to coach one through the process of the universe taking over one's life. A game over coach, the game of the ego is up. Fear creating this means I'm going to die, the end of the meaning-making process. Nothing means anything. Drop the meaning-making process. Speak as. See people through this by seeing through this. And another thing about the psychosis video I shared is that it shows that my goal was to be off meds, and I've reached that goal. How long that will continue, I don't know, especially feeling slightly distressed right now from reading that. And I've been trying to stand up for people with mental health labels by working in the system, and I end up falling down into the psych ward. And I also wrote about the bipolar midwives idea instead of psych wards. And it's a process of processing more than just the self. So even in open dialogue, which is starting to come about, it makes it about the self and the family, or the person in the family. And that's limited. To me, it feels like that will just help someone reintegrate just into the family, when this process is trying to change the whole human family. So to me, it's something beyond. And I think open dialogue sounds really amazing, but it still is dialoguing one into be more connected with their old life, that this process is trying to move one away from. And of course there's value in that. There's value in that connection, but I still feel it's important to find that dialogue with the whole human family. And that's why next year I want to focus more on speaking as, on altruism, which is something in the moment, not just making meaning as maybe something that might be slightly altruistic in some way by spending so much time doing it, but being that in the moment in action, which is way more powerful. Maybe reintegrating with the family actually fuels this openness to the greater humanity and makes one again have the lived experience perspective of me and my family and the people I'm attached to matter. So I think what I'm trying to say there is open dialogue, to just have one in a dialogue to try and reintegrate with the family and be like, me and my family and my friends and my life is what matters. And maybe it's still something beyond that. That's important to integrate with again, for most people probably, but there's still something more. And what is that more? What is that more? And if I get in connection with that, does that provide some kind of buffer to some of the stresses that could actually come from being re-immersed in my other reality of living back at home? And I kind of hope that this self-dialogue is somewhat altruistic. I don't know if it is. And the other day when I was editing that psychosis video, I sort of felt like maybe this does have some value for people. When I was putting the comments in there of what I'm experiencing inwardly, giving some illustration to the external gestures and the inner turmoil one's really going through, and maybe trying to understand that language as someone looking at that process instead of, why are you crouched over? Why are you sitting on the ground? Why are you shaking? That means you have a mental illness. And really, I was trying to just figure things out inside that weren't making sense and that were scaring me. And that's kind of what we do as we walk through our daily lives. Our egos, in a way, are looking for danger or looking for life-affirming things. So looking for something that we want and trying to avoid those things that would harm us. And And that same process is sort of really amplified in so-called psychosis. So I felt like maybe this does have some value. I don't know if it does. It's just a lot of talking. And I felt like if I do die through the energies that come at me, if it does get shared, if this dialogue with myself gets shared, then maybe that's okay. Maybe if it really has value, that's okay with me. And I think I have to be okay with that possibility of getting stressed by what I've shared and then just ending it myself, or somebody misinterpreting some of the meanings I've made pertaining to things that maybe I don't have as part of my experience. Maybe related to the things I say about autism. They're pretty out there. And I do have someone close in my life with a diagnosis of autism, and so I've observed it carefully. And I'm not saying I'm right about anything that I've said. They're just observations. They're just hypotheses yet to be tested, and that will probably never be tested. And getting the brain more in alignment with hypothesizing and making educated or not so educated guesses and wondering, and I feel that helps to grow the brain, and wondering about meaning and seeing meaning, and I feel that is what helps to grow the brain and keep it renewing and regenerating instead of getting lost in old meanings. And I don't really know what I'm talking about. I don't know anything I'm talking about. I don't remember anything of what I've said for the most part. And so I kind of want to leave all of the meanings I've made behind and not think, oh, well, there was something I was talking about 3 months ago that was probably cool, and go based on that, because I think that I just want to move into a different dimension altogether, and something that's more embodied and altruistic. And I think that's the only way that I can stay one step ahead from the wave of chaos this might create. Something about the law of unintended consequences. And I don't have any intention with this. It's just seeing for myself and sharing that, and not seeing for myself in terms of right and wrong and things like that. It's about seeing what's possible and saying, oh, this could be possible, but I really don't know. I really don't know anything. And the process I've been through that's labeled bipolar shows me that I don't know anything. Because even if I go through a period of time where I think I know something, that process comes in and says, you know nothing. You don't even know how you move about. You don't even know the algorithms that control this life or move this world. And it can be scary. And I could have read books and framed it like that, but it wouldn't have been my own discoveries. And maybe 95% of my insights are completely incorrect and invalid. But that's not the point. It's the process and coming to one's own discoveries. And the thing is that any discovery one makes in a given moment, when the moment's passed, oftentimes that discovery is irrelevant, just because there's a new discovery in the next moment that may be built upon the previous discovery, which makes the previous one incorrect and obsolete. But if one didn't move that possibility into consciousness, the brain wouldn't have seen the next thing that's possible. And that's what we do with the advancement of technology and the advancement of different things in life, but we don't do that with our own brains. And people write books based on their own experiences and discoveries and observations in their life and of others. And this is sort of like writing a book, this process of self-dialogue without editing. And we can each write a book if we're attentive enough and not relying on the books of others to write our book, relying on our own perception. And I have read some books to give me a little bit of context to begin to create my own. And it's just like someone training in the field of science who learns the context and the language of science, but then goes on to make their own discoveries. So it's sort of learning about perception and creating context and meaning for oneself. When we can discover things for ourselves, we stay alert and aware and attentive. And then we're not acting based on habit and we don't get bored. So that's it for now. I hope to go on to a little bit more positive things these next few days before the 1 year mark and see what happens next.